DroneTalks is an online platform to spread ideas and to educate in the drone ecosystem. At DroneTalks, we discuss technology, regulatory, business and ecosystem topics openly with industry leaders to enable and foster innovation for a better future.
Hi everyone, I'm Esther Kovac, a founder of DroneTalks, and today I am talking with Christian Janke, who is an assistant professor at the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Hi, Christian.
Hello, Esther. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us. And I'm really excited about having you here at the DroneTalks C-level discussions, because you are one of the first university teacher at the show. So welcome again.
Thanks.
So I was just wondering, what brings you to teach, drone topics and unmanned system applications in a university? So what's your background?
So my background is actually in the first place in manned aviation. So I was a helicopter pilot for the German army in a time where there were not really a lot of drones around. So the only obstacle that you had in low-level airspace was mostly like birds or maybe some cables. And over that, when drones became really a thing, unmanned aviation, I started being interested in that. And then I studied that also. And then I became an academic, working in research and development, and also teaching and instruction in unmanned systems.
That's really great, and I'm just wondering, if someone don't know the Embry-Riddle University, what programs they offered worldwide. So I know initially they are more focused in American educational aspects, but I know there is a worldwide campus as well. So what programs they have there?
Besides the brick and mortar presence campuses in Arizona and in Florida in the United States, we also have the worldwide campus, which is much bigger and has a lot of programs that are always related to aviation in general. So Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at a whole is the oldest fully accredited aviation specialized university in the world. And we also had, since many years and decades now, a strong outreach to distance learning and distance education. So we really started with all kinds of opportunities to reach persons who are working full-time or are deployed, and we did that now also through the worldwide campus. We have campuses, over 100 campuses worldwide distributed, and many of them are in Europe, and we offer programs that are related to aviation in general. So every new topic that emerges, we really have a program for that, like cybersecurity, human factors, maintenance, and data analytics, and also, of course, unmanned systems. So we have the programs for unmanned systems that are also offered in an undergraduate and in a graduate program at the worldwide campus.
That's a great news. We are DroneTalks, so we talk mostly about unmanned system topics. So it just makes me think, obviously, university is so huge potential in this unmanned system field if they kickstarted these programs, right? So can you tell me more about how this program kickstarted? Why? What's your experience regarding teaching those topics?
In the beginning, it was just a specialization in the Master of Science in Aeronautics. There was one, and that was around the 2011, 2012. And then it really started to become more important. There was a lot of interest, not only from the students and graduates, but also from the employment sector, from the drone economy and from the workforce. And that's why we concentrated on creating those two programs by really looking what is the need for knowledge, skills, and abilities from graduates in the job market, in the drone economy. And we designed the program that way, both in a bachelor and in the master. And we are domain agnostic, which means that we cover all domains: ground, maritime, space, and unmanned aircraft systems. But the majority, of course, of the programs, the large majority, because that is what currently is the most what's going on in employment and in research and in the job market, is unmanned aircraft systems.
I cannot agree more. We discussed previously, this is why we kickstarted DroneTalks Academy as well, because people need the knowledge. There are a million programs running. The EU member states just accepted the EU space regulation, which is going to create a lot of potential for drone companies to scale. And they need hire, right? They need people who knows what is unmanned systems about. So when I did my research for this interview, I saw that one of the R&D project or program is working on how to integrate drones into national airspace systems. So I was just wondering what's new on that R&D. Can you share some highlights about that?
So there are many aspects when it comes to operating drones, SUAS, small unmanned aircraft systems in national airspace, which can be controlled or uncontrolled. And since we come from aviation, we have the background of the regulation, also of the safety of the airmanship, that you need to look at how can this actually be achieved, because you are changing the status quo. You are bringing manned and unmanned aviation together in near vicinity in one airspace. There may be encounters, and that needs to be done in the right pace and with the applicable approach. And so the research that I'm doing and some of my colleagues really consists of the connectivity in the airspace. So how can manned and unmanned platforms, airspace participants collaborate, communicate? So there is in manned aviation some airspace participants in see and avoid that are not connected, so they do not send out their position. And in the drone sector, we can see that those systems are very connected, and I think it would be good to apply that approach to everything that is airborne, because we need to know where everybody is, and it is the best way to prevent near misses or encounters or mid-air collisions. And this is what we do in research. We look at technologies that connect airspace participants, such as cellular technology or ADS-B for drones, to have air-to-air and air-to-ground communication. A little bit of that is also related to remote ID, which is not so much related to sense and avoid, but more really to public safety and security, where you have a transparent overview what drone is flying where. And that is also important for connectivity, of course, because you have broadcast remote ID and networked remote ID, and that is the research that we are doing in that field.
It's super interesting. The audience knows that I spent 10 years in a cellular world. So actually it's one of my specialization. And, mentioning again this new use-based regulation, you may have seen that, Christian, the remote ID became mandatory. One of the mandatory is a network identification in the new use-based regulation, which is going to come in place in 2023. So I think Europe definitely identified network one of the main component of safety and information communication channel, which I think going to bring a lot of interesting views on the ecosystem, because let's see how the telcos and the aviation industry can work together, or where is the data sharing model, or how can they safely integrate to each other's system without losing their business leads on the other initiatives. So I think it's really interesting, because technologically it's possible, but the business is a different topic.
Absolutely.
And talking about regulatory, we mentioned these European updates, but I know you are heavily involved in other areas as well, which is not only Europe. So can you share some interesting examples from anywhere else in the world regarding regulation? And what do you find the best, the most innovative idea or approach?
In general, when it comes to regulation, it's in many countries worldwide actually the same, I would say 80 to 90% of the regulation, because you have the first things first, which is registration of remote pilots, operators, and the drone itself, the SUAS. Then you have the waivers and permission to fly in certain areas. You have the no-fly zones. You need to have a repository and an archive and a system of clearing flights and communication approach and protocol. So what I saw is that there are some countries that have in threshold and developing countries, for example, not so many regulation, because it's something very new in the United States, and in Europe, for example, we have a very advanced regulation where you have the system that involves the BVLOS flights, for example, that are restricted beyond visual line of sight, or you have specific safety margins that you need to think about. So I would say there is a great range worldwide, and I'm also looking at the registration numbers, because right now in Europe we have a mandatory registration in all European member states, which means that we will soon have a very precise number of drones and operators and remote pilots, because until now that was only guesswork, but then we will have the right numbers. And then I really don't want to name any countries as best practices, but I can see that in really large countries it's a great challenge, but they are doing very well, like in India, for example, applying best practices and registration and giving permission to fly in a commercial operation, because all countries distinguish between model and recreational flying and commercial flying for money, and sometimes have very similar but sometimes different regulations for those two areas. And we can really see that this approach has been overtaken in almost all parts of the world.
And on the other hand, when we talk about regulation, one of the biggest challenge, I think this challenge is different in different countries. So I'm really curious to understand your opinion on that. But, social acceptance. So I'm just wondering, what do you see is that influencing the regulation, or where are we regarding social acceptance when you talk about unmanned systems to anyone in Germany? How they feel about, of course, not the ones who are already involved in the ecosystem, but outside of those. And what do you see what the industry needs to do to drive social acceptance, so drones can become something like cars, where it's normal?
I think in the future it will be similar, like cars, or like a crane. I mean, a drone, if it's used for commercial purposes, in most cases, it's really a professional tool. And you see someone wearing a yellow vest and preparing the flight area. And that was a couple of years ago something very, very new. But right now, it's really, people are getting used to that, and getting used to maybe even long range flights and BVLOS operations and agricultural application, drone logistics. All this is coming very slowly to the awareness of the people, and they get used to it. And I think then slowly there will be less and less problems and more acceptance, especially if you can show that in very specific use cases you can even save lives, save money, save time by using drones, and it needs to be transported much more and be more transparent, that people talk about this. That's also, I think, a task for the drone economy and also for the regulatory bodies and the authorities to make visible what the advantages are and what you can do. And it's also something as a chance for education, right? And in my case, I talk about academic education. Professional education is something very near related to that. So I think that in many areas there needs to be, especially in vocational training and professional education, and adaptation to bring the drone as a tool, as a something that you use to do your job, into the curricula that are being taught. And that is also, I think, a huge challenge for the future.
Thank you, Christian. I think challenge accepted. As an ecosystem, we all work on that. But it's a great challenge, and it was really lovely talking to you.
Likewise, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Brought to you by DroneTalks Online, a platform designed to spread ideas and educate in the drone ecosystem. Search for DroneTalks.online to hear from more of our industry leaders and to find out how you can get involved.